I'd been driving for hours when the GPS told me to take a left onto a cracked county road that didn't even have a name on the signpost. The sun was slipping behind the Wyoming hills, the sky bruised purple, and I remember thinking how empty it all felt. Like the world had stopped a few miles back and forgotten to tell me. I was vlogging the trip for my small horror travel channel. "Exploring America's ghost towns," I said to the camera, trying to sound excited. My own voice felt out of place in that silence. A faded wooden sign appeared at the bend. "Welcome to Hollow Creek, Est 1894. The letters were half rotted, and something about the word welcome looked carved over another word underneath. Maybe beware. The asphalt turned to gravel, then dirt. My headlights caught shapes of collapsed houses, empty porches, a rusted swing moving there was no wind. I killed the engine and stepped out. The air didn't move. It didn't sound. Even in total stillness, you expect something. The buzz of insects, a far-off car, your own breathing echoed. But here, it felt like the air had weight, like sound itself was being pressed down. I whispered into the camera, "Do you hear that?" and immediately realized how stupid the question was. There was nothing to hear. A minute later, I walked toward the first building, a diner. Inside, the counter was covered in a film of gray dust. Coffee cups still sat where they'd been left, half filled, long evaporated to crust. A faded jukebox stood silent in the corner. I reached to touch it and my skin prickled. It was warm. I pulled my hand back fast, recording the reaction. When I looked through the camera screen, I swear for a second I saw someone sitting in one of the booths, a man in a miner's hat. I lowered the camera. The booth was empty. Outside again, dusk had turned to deep blue. I walked the main street, panning the camera across cracked shop fronts. Barber, general store, Mercy Motel. That's where I decided to stay for the night. The motel door creaked open easily. Inside, everything was coated with that same gray film. The register on the counter still had a key in it, room 3. I took it, half laughing. "Guess it's self-check-in," I muttered. Room 3 smelled faintly of earth and metal, like a cave. I set up my tripod, started a night vision vlog segment, and sat on the bed to talk to the lens. That's when I noticed the sound. Not quite a sound, more like pressure. The walls seemed to breathe. The wallpaper expanded slightly, then relaxed, in a slow rhythm. I blinked hard, thinking maybe it was the low light, the shadows from my camera lamp. I placed my hand against the wall. It pulsed, faint and slow, like something alive beneath plaster. I stumbled back, heart hammering. The camera's red light blinked in the corner, still recording. I didn't want to look at the footage yet. About another minute passed. I heard something faint. Finally, a sound. It was a breath, not mine. Shallow, wet, just behind me. I turned fast. Nothing there. The motel air was thick now, harder to pull into my lungs. I decided to sleep in the car instead. But when I stepped outside, the fog had rolled in. Fast, heavy, milky white. My car was barely visible 10 feet away. I ran for it, opened the door, and froze. Every window inside was fogged from the inside. In the condensation, drawn by a finger, were words, "Stay until morning." I spun around, the fog swirling like smoke. For a second, I saw shapes in it. Silhouettes moving through the gray, slow and jerky, as if underwater. My camera light caught one clearly. A man in mining gear, his mouth open in a silent scream, eyes black pits. Then the light flickered, and he was gone. I dove into the car, slammed the doors, and locked them. My chest heaved. The silence pressed harder. I could hear my own pulse in my ears, and underneath it, faint, synchronized breathing. It wasn't coming from me. I sat in the driver's seat for what felt like hours, too scared to move. My camera was still on, the little red light blinking against the windshield fog. I tried to speak to it, to document what was happening. But when I opened my mouth, no words came out. The sound just didn't exist. I whispered, "Hello?" and heard nothing. My throat moved, air left my lungs, but no sound followed. It was as if the entire town had stolen my voice. Panic hit like a jolt of electricity. I slammed the car horn. The light flickered on the dash, but no noise. Not even a crackle. I hit it again and again. Nothing. Then, very faintly from somewhere in the fog, came an answering honk. Long, low, distant. I froze. It wasn't an echo, it was a reply. I looked out the window. Through the fog, another set of headlights blinked on, maybe 50 yards away. They flickered once, twice, like a signal. I reached for my door handle. My instinct screamed no, but curiosity is poison in places like this. I opened the door anyway. The fog swallowed everything beyond a few feet. I stepped out, camera shaking in my hand. "Who's there?" I mouthed silently. Still no voice. My own breath looked wrong in the air. Too thick, like smoke. I followed the faint glow of those other headlights. The gravel under my shoes didn't crunch. It just sank softly, like walking on a damp lung. The closer I got, the clearer the shape became. Not a car, but the twisted remains of one, half buried in the earth. Headlights still glowing after decades. Inside, through the shattered windshield, I saw what was left of a driver's body. Skin dry and gray, mouth open wide, ribs bent outward, as if something had tried to crawl out. That's when the air around me moved for the first time all night. A slow exhale brushed against my ear. I turned, shaking. The fog behind me swirled inward, spiraling toward the motel like it was being inhaled. I ran. My footsteps made no sound. The whole street seemed to vibrate, pulsing in rhythm. Inhale, exhale. As I reached the motel steps, I felt the pull of the air again, dragging against my body, tugging me backward like an invisible tide. I stumbled inside, slammed the door, and fell against it, gasping. The walls of room 3 were moving now, clearly, visibly, swelling outward, collapsing inward, the wallpaper stretching like skin. The camera on the tripod was still running, pointing at the bed. In the lens reflection, I saw something sitting there. A shadow, almost human, head tilted. When I turned, nothing was there. I replayed the clip immediately. On the screen, I watched myself walk into the room. But in the footage, I wasn't alone. There was a shape standing directly behind me, breathing heavily into my neck. I could see my hair moving from its breath. I dropped the camera. Then I noticed something I hadn't before. On the nightstand, beside the bed, a guest book. Pages yellowed, names scrawled in fading ink. I flipped through 1972, stayed one night. Heard voices in the walls. Never again. 1985, air feels heavy. Can't breathe right. Leaving tonight. 1999, it's breathing. Oh God, it's alive. The last entry was dated October 31st, 2010. It said, "If you're reading this, you're already part of it. The town only exhales when someone new arrives. That's why it feels empty. It's holding its breath, waiting for you." My chest tightened so hard I couldn't inhale. I gasped, but nothing came in. My vision blurred. The air in the room throbbed around me like a giant set of lungs compressing. Then, through the haze, I saw something moving beneath the carpet. Shapes writhing just under the floorboards, crawling upward. The wallpaper peeled back as if pulled from the inside, revealing something wet and dark beneath, slick like flesh. I stumbled toward the door, grabbed the handle and yanked, locked. From behind me, the camera still pointed at the bed, and I finally heard, a sound. A slow, deep inhale. The room expanded like a balloon. The doorframe groaned. The air was pulled from my lungs completely. My last thought before blacking out was that maybe Hollow Creek wasn't abandoned at all. Maybe the people never left. They just became the air. I woke up hours later, outside in my car, dawn breaking. The fog was gone. My camera sat on the passenger seat, still recording. I pressed play. The video showed me sleeping in the car, while the motel behind me breathed. And just before the footage cut off, a faint whisper filled the speakers. "Take a deep breath." When I woke, the world was gray again. The morning sun looked weak, filtered through a haze that hadn't burned away. My car windows were clear now. No writing, no fog, but the glass was cold to the touch, colder than frost. I checked my camera. The battery light blinked red, though I'd fully charged it yesterday. The last file was still recording when I passed out. I hit stop. Runtime, 8 hours. I pressed play. For the first few minutes the footage was normal, just me asleep, breathing slow. Then the frame trembled. The car door handle lifted by itself once. The door didn't open, but the sound of breathing filled the mic. Steady, close, too close. It lasted 43 seconds, then silence. I told myself it was the wind, But the lie didn't stick. The wind doesn't have lungs. I started the engine and pointed the car toward the main road, wanting out. The GPS was dead. The screen showed only a white haze. No coordinates. After 10 minutes of driving, I saw the same sign again. Welcome to Hollow Creek. I hadn't turned around. I decided to head back to the motel. Maybe I'd missed a turn. Maybe something with the camera could prove what I'd seen. The closer I got, the heavier the air felt, like the pressure before a storm. Inside, the lobby was darker than before. Dust hung in the light like static. I could swear I heard a faint heartbeat. Thump, pause, coming from the walls. Room 3's door was ajar. I hadn't left it that way. The bedspread was smoothed perfectly, corners tucked tight. My camera tripod was gone. In its place on the floor was a cassette recorder, old-fashioned, labeled Play Me. I pressed the button. At first, nothing. Then a whisper, my own voice. If you're hearing this, it means I went back inside. I froze. I hadn't recorded that. The voice continued, ragged, frightened. It's in the walls. Don't breathe when you hear it. It'll think you belong. Static. Then faint moaning, like someone exhaling through a cracked door. The sound grew louder even after I stopped the tape. The walls swelled again, slow and rhythmic. A bubble formed under the wallpaper and burst with a damp pop, releasing a smell like wet soil. Something dark oozed from the seam and slid down the wall. Thick, almost like oil, but pulsing faintly. Moving on its own. I backed up, tripped over the nightstand. The lamp crashed and the room fell into shadows. In that dim light, the pattern of the wallpaper shifted. The floral shapes stretched into faces, eyes closed, mouths open as if gasping for air. Every few seconds one would twitch, inhale, and fall still. My camera, missing minutes ago, now sat on the bed. The red light blinked on by itself. Through the viewfinder, I saw movement behind me. A figure pressed outward from inside the wall, human-shaped but blurred, like a person trapped between paint and plaster. Its mouth opened wide in a silent scream. I dropped the camera again. The thumping heartbeat in the walls sped up. The whole room pulsed in sync with mine. I ran for the door. It opened easily this time, but the hallway beyond had changed. The wallpaper was raw, stripped away, exposing ribs of wood slick with moisture. Each plank expanded and shrank as if it were breathing. At the far end, the exit sign flickered, dim red through the haze. Between me and it stood the shape of a man, unmoving. He faced the other way, shoulders rising and falling in long, deep breaths. I took one step forward. The man stopped breathing, then the hallway exhaled. Every door along it blew open at once, a rush of air bursting outward, carrying dust and whispers that brushed against my face like invisible fingers. The man turned. His skin was the same color as the walls, gray, thin, stretched tight. His eyes were sealed, but his chest moved violently, desperate for air that wasn't there. He took one shuddering step toward me, and with each step, the wallpaper behind him peeled off, revealing more faces trapped inside. I bolted back into the room and slammed the door. The wood pulsed under my hands. The whispering rose into a single, drawn-out breath that seemed to come from the entire building. Then, silence. The air felt heavy again, thick and still. I could breathe, barely. On the floor, the tape recorder clicked. A new voice spoke, calm and hollow. "You're breathing with it now." The cassette stopped. I didn't move for a long time. I just sat there on the motel floor, staring at the cassette recorder, waiting for it to speak again. The air felt too thick to swallow, like the oxygen had turned to syrup. When I finally forced myself up, the room seemed smaller. The ceiling sagged slightly, just enough to notice. I opened the window for fresh air. But behind the glass wasn't the outside world. It was more wall, wood, wallpaper, pulsing faintly, like the motel had sealed itself shut around me. I turned back to the door. The handle was gone. In its place, a smooth patch of plaster. I tried slamming my shoulder against it, but it gave just enough to push inward, soft and spongy, then pushed back. Something behind it pushed back. The impact knocked the camera off the bed. The lens cracked, but the light stayed on. When I picked it up, I saw through the fractured glass that there were shapes in the walls, faint, moving slowly under the surface like people underwater. Their faces pressed out for seconds at a time, mouths opening and closing, releasing faint sighs that fogged the air. And then I noticed something worse. Each time one face disappeared, the wallpaper on the opposite wall stretched outward, forming a new one. The walls weren't just breathing, they were growing. I whispered, "Please stop." My voice actually made sound this time. Barely. That was when the building seemed to hear me. Every light bulb in the hallway outside flickered in rhythm with the breathing, and for the first time I could hear something beyond the walls. A muffled groan, like timbers bending under a heavy weight. The floor trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling. And then I realized, the sound wasn't from above or below. It was inside the walls themselves, moving through them like a heartbeat. I grabbed my backpack, the camera, and the cassette recorder, and started toward the bathroom. The door was still open. Inside, the mirror was fogged over, not from steam, but from breath. When I wiped the glass clean, my reflection wasn't mine. It looked like me, same jacket, same camera, but its eyes were closed, chest rising and falling. My reflection breathed. I wasn't. I stumbled back. The reflection's lips parted slightly, and I heard my own voice whisper from nowhere. "It's trying to make room." Something wet dropped from the ceiling onto my shoulder. I looked up. The ceiling had split open in a long, jagged line, and beneath it, I swear, something pulsed. A faint hum filled the air, not mechanical, more like the sound you hear inside your own head when you press your ears shut. I ran. The hallway stretched longer than before, lights flashing dim white, then red, then white again. Every door I passed bulged outward, like something on the other side was trying to escape. At the end of the hall stood a single exit sign glowing faintly green. Beneath it, the same man I'd seen earlier, pale, still, eyes closed. This time, his mouth moved, slowly, silently. When I got closer, I realized he wasn't standing. He was embedded in the wall up to his shoulders, as if the building had swallowed him and was keeping him alive just enough to breathe. His chest rose once, fell. Then, faintly, he whispered, "Don't. Exhale." I froze. My lungs screamed for air. But before I could stop myself, I let out a shaky breath. The entire hallway responded. The walls inhaled. Hard. Air was pulled out of my lungs, tearing at my chest. My camera hit the floor and rolled, capturing. The wallpaper ripping open to reveal hundreds of faces gasping in unison. I dropped to my knees, clawing at the floor, desperate for any kind of exit. My hand struck something metal, a vent grate. I tore it off and crawled inside. The duct was warm, humid, and alive. The metal walls moved slightly with each breath of the building. I crawled deeper, trying not to make a sound. The breathing slowed again, calm now, steady. Maybe it didn't know where I'd gone. Then, behind me, something else started crawling. I froze. The sound was soft but rhythmic. Scrape, drag, inhale. I turned the camera back. The duct behind me was empty until it moved. The metal swelled inward, forming the faint impression of a handprint. Then another. Then a face, pressing through like the wall itself was learning how to follow me. I scrambled forward and saw a faint light ahead. Another vent opening. I kicked it loose and tumbled into a basement room filled with broken furniture and old mining equipment. The air was cooler here, still heavy but breathable. In the center of the room sat a massive iron door bolted into the stone. Above it, etched in rust, "Breathing chamber, do not open." Behind the door, something shifted. Slow, patient. A deep inhale rattled the hinges. The building around me shuddered as if the whole town had taken one massive breath in. Then came the exhale, a long, low sound that blew dust off every surface. and whispered through every crack in the walls. And beneath that whisper, I heard voices, hundreds of them, saying the same words over and over. Don't breathe, don't breathe. I dropped the camera. The screen went black, but the mic kept recording, picking up one last sound. My breath, shaky and panicked, followed by another one right beside it. 2 sets of lungs, one mine, one not. I didn't remember falling asleep. 1 minute I was crouched near that massive iron door, listening to the breath behind it, and the next thing I knew, I was waking up on the cold concrete floor. For a second, I thought I'd dreamed it all. The breathing walls, the faces in the wallpaper, the voice telling me not to exhale. But then I heard it again, that same slow rhythm, like someone sleeping nearby. The door marked "Breathing Chamber, Do Not Open" was still there. But something had changed. The bolts were looser. One hung halfway out, metal twisted like it had been bent from the inside. I didn't go near it. Instead, I pointed my camera toward the far wall, where a narrow tunnel opened into darkness. It looked like an old mine shaft, wooden beams half collapsed, black dust on the floor. The air coming from that tunnel was colder. Still, somehow it carried the faint smell of earth and iron, and something else, like wet stone after rain. I whispered into the mic, "If anyone ever finds this recording, please, don't come here." I stepped into the tunnel. The moment I crossed the threshold, my flashlight dimmed. The beam cut through maybe 10 feet before fading into fog. The walls were slick. In the camera light, I could see marks. Not scratches, but indentations, like handprints pressed into the stone itself. Some small, some large, all reaching downward. I passed an old cart tipped on its side. The tools inside were still there. Pickaxes, helmets, a rusted oil lantern. I lifted one of the helmets and froze. Inside, faintly visible in the metal reflection, was a face. Mine. But the eyes were open too wide, and they were watching me move. I dropped it. The sound echoed too long, bouncing down the tunnel again and again until it didn't sound like metal anymore. It sounded like breathing. The deeper I went, the more the tunnel felt alive. The air seemed to pulse, pushing and pulling against my chest. My heartbeat matched its rhythm without me meaning to. A few minutes later, the path split. The left tunnel sloped upward toward faint light. The right tunnel went down, deeper into darkness. I should have turned left. Every instinct told me to. But then the camera picked up something faint. A voice. A man's voice, whispering, "Please help me." I turned right. The deeper I walked, the colder it got. The fog turned thicker, clinging to my skin like damp cloth. I could feel my breath bouncing back against my face, but it wasn't syncing with the air anymore. It was out of rhythm, like the tunnel itself was breathing at its own pace. And then my flashlight flickered. For half a second, I saw them. Dozens of figures standing just beyond the light's edge. Their helmets were cracked, clothes torn, faces hidden in shadow. None of them moved. I froze, barely daring to blink. The light flickered again. They were gone. But when the beam steadied, something else caught my eye. Along the walls, burned into the rock, were shapes, human silhouettes, arms raised, mouths open. It looked like shadows that had been carved there. I raised the camera and zoomed in. The lens struggled to focus. In the center of the tunnel wall, one of the shadows wasn't flat. It bulged slightly, like a bump beneath the rock. I stepped closer. The rock surface was warm. Then it moved. I jumped back as a faint outline of a face pressed outward through the stone. Eyes closed, lips trembling as if whispering something. The voice was barely audible, buried in the echo of the tunnel. It took the air. "We couldn't scream! I ran!" The walls pulsed faster, the air shaking dust loose from the ceiling. Each breath I took came shorter and sharper, like the tunnel was stealing some of it away. Behind me, footsteps echoed, heavy, uneven, dragging. I turned once. The figures were moving now, slowly, their bodies jerking with every inhale the tunnel took. Their shadows clung to the walls, following them like second skins. I tripped over a broken rail and hit the ground hard. My flashlight rolled away, beams spinning across the tunnel walls. The shadows moved in the light, but the men didn't. Their shadows walked ahead of them, bending and stretching unnaturally, almost detached. I scrambled for my flashlight, but before I could grab it, the beam flicked upward, illuminating a warning painted in white letters above a wooden support beam. "The mine still breathes." And as I stared at those words, a low, rumbling exhale came from deep below, long enough to rattle the rails under my knees. The flashlight flickered again. The shadows vanished. But now I could hear something new. A sound like faint whispering mixed with scraping metal, moving closer from the direction I came. I picked up the flashlight and ran toward the faint light of the upper tunnel, lungs burning. The deeper I breathed, the heavier the air grew. It wasn't air anymore. It was thick. Something brushed my shoulder, invisible but solid. Another breath, hot, damp, touched the back of my neck. I didn't turn around. At last, I saw the end of the tunnel. Daylight leaking through a crack in the rocks. I pushed through, squeezing into open air. Outside, the fog had lifted slightly. The town below lay silent, the same as before. But when I looked back at the tunnel entrance, I saw movement. Faint silhouettes standing just inside, watching. Their shadows stretched long across the ground, even though there was no sun. I checked my camera. The footage was still rolling. When I played it back, there was no video, only blackness. But the audio, it was breathing. Hundreds of breaths, and at the very end, faintly, a man's whisper. "You're part of the shift now." The air outside the tunnel was thinner, but it didn't feel right. I sat on a pile of broken rocks, trying to steady my breathing. My camera was still running, the red light blinking faintly, but the lens was fogged. I wiped it clean with my sleeve and froze. Through the viewfinder, the tunnel entrance looked darker than before. Too dark. Not the kind of dark that comes from shadows, the kind that swallows light whole. As I zoomed in, the camera began to distort, the image shaking slightly, like static rippling across old VHS tape. The screen warped for a second, then cleared, and for one frame, I swear I saw movement. A figure standing at the entrance. I blinked, looked up. Nothing. Just empty air. I looked back down at the camera again. The screen flickered, and this time, the figure was closer. I switched the camera off. I didn't need proof anymore. Every second I spent near that mine felt wrong, like I was standing on a lung about to exhale. When I turned away, the wind shifted. It wasn't blowing across the valley anymore. It was coming from the tunnel. A faint, rhythmic rush, steady and slow. It was breathing again. I started walking back toward town. Each step felt heavier, like the ground was pulling me down. The dirt road curved through empty houses, silent, hollow buildings with windows that stared. One of them had its door half open, swaying lightly. I would have ignored it, but a faint tapping sound came from inside. Not random. 3 knocks, pause, 3 more. The same rhythm as my heartbeat. I raised the camera again. If anyone finds this, I think something in this town copies sound. Maybe memory. Maybe... The door creaked. A gust of wind moved through the house, and for a split second, the tapping turned into whispering. Faint, like several people breathing the same word over and over. "Stay!" I stepped back, shaking my head. "No," I muttered. "No, I'm not staying here." But my own voice echoed differently. It didn't sound like me. It came back deeper, slower, like the house had spoken instead. I backed away, keeping my eyes on the door until I reached the middle of the street. That's when I saw them again. The same miners' shadows from the tunnel, stretched across the asphalt. But there was no one casting them. The streetlights above were dead, yet the shadows moved, rippling faintly like smoke underwater. One reached toward my feet. I jumped back. The shadow paused, then pulled itself closer again. My chest tightened. I turned and ran. The road led me back toward the main square, the one with the broken statue and the dry fountain. That's when I noticed something new. In the center of the fountain was water, just a little, and it was rippling, though there was no wind. I approached slowly, camera trembling in my hand. The ripples grew faster. I leaned over the edge, and the reflection that looked back wasn't mine. It looked like me, but the mouth was moving. "You went too deep." I stumbled back, almost dropping the camera. My reflection's lips were still moving, even though I wasn't. Then, just as suddenly, the water went still. Perfectly still. A low hum rolled through the ground beneath me, subtle at first, then rising. The buildings around the square groaned as if the entire town were shifting in its sleep. Every window rattled in rhythm. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. It was breathing again, louder now, through the streets, the alleys, the walls. I pressed my hands over my ears, but the sound wasn't coming from outside. It was inside my head. That's when I realized I wasn't hearing the town breathe. I was breathing with it. Panic hit me hard. I dropped the camera and started to run, but the road ahead blurred, buildings melting into one another, shapes bending like reflections in moving water. Every turn led me back to the same square. The fountain. The reflection. No matter which way I went, I ended up there. The reflection smiled now. Not cruelly, almost kindly. Like it was tired. "You shouldn't have listened," it whispered. "Once you hear it, you can't stop." I backed away until I hit something solid, the statue at the center of the square. Except now, it wasn't broken. It was whole, and carved into the base, in the same white paint from the tunnel, were new words. "The shift has begun." The air grew thick again. Every breath I took came out in clouds, even though the night wasn't cold. My skin prickled, like the fog was touching me, brushing against my arms and face. And then, the fog exhaled. It rolled outward, swallowing the square, the buildings, everything. The world faded to gray. I turned the camera back on, hoping to catch one last shot before running. But the moment I hit record, the screen lit up with faces. Dozens, maybe hundreds, overlapping, whispering, moving their lips in silence. One face looked straight at me, a miner's helmet, eyes hollow, then the screen went black. When the fog cleared, I was standing in front of the motel again. The sign flickered weakly. Vacancy. The air was still. Too still. I looked down. The camera was gone. But when I reached into my jacket pocket, I found something cold. A small metal tag covered in dirt. I brushed it clean. Stamped into the metal were 4 words. Property of Hollow Creek Mine. That night, I slept in my car with the doors locked. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear faint breathing. Not from outside, but from inside the car, just behind my seat. And just before dawn, I felt something brush my shoulder. A whisper followed. "Your shift starts soon." I didn't sleep long. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it, the breathing. Not outside the car this time, not from the town. From inside me, I jolted awake again, heart hammering. The streets of Hollow Creek were quiet now, almost serene. But quiet in this town is never just quiet. It's waiting. I grabbed my camera, the small one I'd stashed in the glove compartment. The screen flickered to life, and I realized it had recorded something while I slept. Static first, then faint whispers. My own voice repeating words I'd never said. "The shift begins. You're part of it." I tried to shut it off. The buttons didn't work. The screen went black, but the whispers didn't stop. They seemed to fill the car, soft but insistent, tugging at my thoughts. I had to move. I couldn't sit there and listen to that, whatever it was. I started walking back toward the motel. The streets were empty. Every step echoed strangely, like I was moving through a hollow tunnel rather than an open street. The motel sign flickered weakly in the distance. I approached, careful, holding the camera in front of me. The lobby was the same as before, dust-covered and still. The iron door to the basement, the breathing chamber, was slightly ajar this time. I froze. Part of me wanted to run. Part of me, the part that had stayed in Hollow Creek long enough to hear its rhythm, wanted to know what was behind that door. The air from the basement was colder than the night. It carried a faint metallic tang, like old rain on stone. I stepped down the stairs, each one creaking under my weight. Shadows stretched along the walls, twisted and long, like the building itself was reaching for me. I could hear the whispering again. Faint, almost too soft to understand at first. "Breathe, or join." The words rolled over each other, distorted, like echoes in a canyon. I held my breath. The walls of the basement pulsed slightly, and I could swear I felt them moving, like lungs inhaling and exhaling around me. I kept moving. The room at the end of the stairs was vast, filled with old mining equipment. Helmets, carts, picks, all arranged neatly, as if waiting for workers who never returned. Then I noticed the shadows. They weren't attached to anyone this time. They floated along the walls, slowly drifting, merging, separating. Each shadow was humanoid, but no features were visible. Just a vague outline, a memory of someone who might have walked these tunnels decades ago. One drifted closer. I stepped back, heart hammering. The shadow paused, and I noticed something terrifying. It mimicked me. Every twitch, every breath I took, it matched. I realized then that the shadows weren't real people. They were echoes, memories, trapped inside the mine, following anyone who dared enter. They were waiting for me to make a mistake, waiting for me to breathe too freely. I swallowed hard. My throat felt tight. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. My legs moved forward on their own, drawn toward a large iron door at the back of the room. Faded white letters above it. The shift chamber. Do not enter. My hands shook as I reached for the handle. The shadows pressed closer along the walls, their forms stretching, like smoke being pulled toward heat. The whispers became louder, overlapping, almost chanting now. Join. The shift. Breathe. Join. I flinched. The door groaned as if it had been waiting for someone to touch it. A draft of air escaped from the crack, carrying faint wet sounds, like distant lungs exhaling, echoing from deep within the earth. I took a deep breath, forced my shaking hands to open the door. The hinges groaned, and the chamber inside was empty, at least at first glance. The walls were lined with old mining equipment, like the rest of the basement, but in the center was a large pit. From it rose faint mist, swirling slowly, almost alive. The shadows followed me inside, gliding along the walls, drifting closer to the pit. The whispers were all around me now, almost deafening. Join, or remain, inhale, exhale. I stepped closer to the pit. The mist was cool, almost tangible, brushing against my skin. The whispers merged into one voice, soft, patient, endless. It's time. The shift begins. I froze. My camera was in my hands, recording everything. I wanted to run. My body screamed at me. But the air around the pit felt like it wanted me to stay. Like it was pulling me in with every breath I took. The shadows pressed even closer along the walls. I could feel them brushing my arms and back. They didn't touch, not physically, but I felt them. A presence, patient, waiting. I realized then that Hollow Creek wasn't just a town. It was alive. Every building, every wall, every shadow, it breathed together. And now, it wanted me to join the rhythm. Inhale, exhale. I stood at the edge of the pit, my camera trembling in my hands. The mist swirled upward, thick and heavy, brushing against my skin like a living thing. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, rising and falling in a rhythm that matched my own heartbeat. Breathe. Join. Exhale. Inhale. I tried to step back, but the shadows along the walls pressed closer. Not physically, but their presence weighed on me, pushing me toward the pit. The air smelled damp and metallic, thick with the town itself. Every inhale I took felt stolen from somewhere else. I glanced down into the mist. Shapes were forming, vague humanoid outlines that moved just beneath the fog, twisting as though struggling to rise. They weren't solid, not fully, but their presence was undeniable. And they were watching me, waiting. A chill ran down my spine as one of the shadows from the walls stretched further, merging with the mist. The air itself seemed to breathe with it, pulsing in and out, pressing against my chest. I realized with horror that this was what the shift meant. To become part of the town, part of its rhythm. Join the rhythm. You belong. I wanted to run, but my legs refused to cooperate. My own breath felt heavy, like it had been borrowed by something else. The shadows along the walls moved in perfect sync with my pulse, their forms stretching and contracting with every heartbeat. Then I saw it. The pit itself wasn't empty. The mist coalesced into a figure, faint at first, then clearer. A man wearing the old miner's helmet, his form glowing faintly in the dim light. His face was featureless yet familiar, like a memory I couldn't place. He lifted an arm slowly, pointing toward the pit. I leaned back instinctively, but the edge of the pit seemed to extend endlessly downward. My stomach churned as I realized I wasn't looking into a hole. I was looking into Hollow Creek itself, condensed into this chamber, breathing, alive, and endless. The whispers became a chant, low and vibrating through my chest. The shift. Inhale, exhale. I stumbled backward, camera slipping from my hands. The lens caught the shadows merging with the mist, flowing like smoke into the pit. The air around me thickened further, pulling at my skin, tugging at my chest, demanding compliance. I swallowed hard, trying to resist. My own heartbeat pounded in my ears, a frantic counterpoint to the town's rhythm. And then I felt it. My own breath slowed, then faltered. Something deep in the pit was sinking with me, matching the pace of my lungs. Panic surged. I wrenched my arms out, trying to break free, but it was like moving through water. The shadows were not just around me. They were inside me now, pressing at my ribs, guiding my every inhalation and exhalation. I collapsed to my knees. The pit pulsed beneath me. A single word echoed in my head, distinct above the overlapping whispers. Belong. I tried to resist, to run, to scream, but my voice had already left me. The air itself had claimed it. Every whisper, every shadow, every breath I took now belonged to Hollow Creek. I wanted to close my eyes, to wait it out, but something compelled me to look. The mist swirled into dozens of faces, all silent, all featureless, all watching. They were not trying to scare me. They were waiting for me to understand. Once you breathe with us, a voice echoed deep inside my chest. You never leave. I felt my mind tugging toward the pit, not like gravity, like understanding, like recognition. The rhythm of the town entered me, slow and steady at first, then faster, deeper. My own heartbeat merged with the whispers and the air. I gasped. For a moment I thought I was fighting. Then the realization hit. I wasn't fighting anymore. I was breathing with it. The shadows pressed closer along the walls, rising into the mist, merging with the pit. The glow intensified. I could feel it. The town itself, alive, expansive, aware. Hollow Creek was not just a place. It was a being, and I was part of it now, linked to every breath, every wall, every shadow. And in that moment, I understood the shift. Not death, not punishment, transformation. I was becoming part of Hollow Creek's endless rhythm, a ghost of memory and sound, a whisper in the walls. Belong. I closed my eyes. The last thing I heard before surrendering completely was the gentle exhale of the town itself. Slow, patient, eternal. I woke to silence. Or at least what felt like silence. But I knew better. In Hollow Creek, silence is never empty. It's a pause before the next inhale. The motel parking lot was gray, still, and completely still. No fog this time, no drifting shadows. Just the faint outline of buildings, broken windows, and the cracked signs swaying in a wind that didn't exist. I reached for my camera. Nothing. Dead. My last tether to reality gone. The first breath hit me almost immediately. Not outside, not the air. It was inside me. My chest tightened. My lungs ached. The rhythm was slow, deliberate. Hollow Creek was awake, and it knew I was here. I tried to move. My legs felt leaden, heavy. Every step I took echoed in a way that didn't match the distance. The town itself seemed to bend space, stretching the streets, twisting the shadows. I passed the fountain in the main square. Water rippled without wind. The reflection showed me, or someone like me, smiling faintly. Not in my control, not fully human, a ghost of what I'd been. Then the whispers began, soft at first. Belong, inhale. Exhale. I covered my ears. It didn't help. The sound wasn't just around me. It was inside me, in my bones, in the rhythm of my heartbeat. I couldn't escape. The streets led me to the old mine entrance. The iron door to the breathing chamber was ajar, pulsing faintly as if breathing in sync with my own chest. I knew I shouldn't go back. Every instinct screamed to run. But something, curiosity, fear, or inevitability, drew me forward. The basement smelled of damp earth and iron, familiar and terrifying. Shadows stretched along the walls, merging with the mist from the pit. Each shadow mirrored me perfectly. Every twitch, every step, every heartbeat reflected back, like the town itself was alive inside me. The shift never ends, the whisper said. I swallowed. My voice returned weak. I don't want this. The shadows didn't answer. They just pressed closer, patient, silent. I edged toward the pit. Mist swirled around my feet, rising in ghostly tendrils. The miners' silhouettes from before were there, faceless, featureless, but fully aware. Their presence wasn't threatening. It was expectant, and then I felt it. A tug from below. Not violent, gentle, insistent, like the town reaching into me. Inhale. I fought it. My chest tightened. I exhaled anyway, slowly. The pit responded. The mist swirled faster, pulling me in. Shadows climbed the walls, stretching toward me, and whispers merged into one voice, deep and low, echoing from every direction. Join. The breath. The rhythm. Belong. My knees hit the concrete. My hands shook. I wanted to scream. My lungs ached, every muscle tense. The pit pulsed beneath me, alive, breathing. And I realized with horror that it was guiding me. My body wasn't moving on its own. I was moving with it. I fell to the floor, gasping, fighting the rhythm inside me. But the whispers were everywhere now, inside my mind, my chest, my ears. The breath never ends. I tried to pull myself away, but my hands moved toward the pit as if drawn by a magnet. The shadows on the walls shifted, almost smiling, though they had no faces. The mist rose, wrapping around my legs. The miners' echoes from the past surfaced, their voices whispering in unison. Once you breathe with us, you cannot leave. My heartbeat synchronized with the town. Every inhale and exhale became shared. The air pressed against my chest. I tried to resist. But the rhythm was stronger than me. A sound, deep, low, unending, came from below. Not wind, not water, breath. The pit itself inhaled and exhaled in harmony with me, demanding my compliance. I could feel it now, every wall of the basement pulsing in time. Shadows rose from the floor, floating toward me, brushing my shoulders. Not violent, just guiding, patient. Belong, inhale. Exhale. My hands touched the mist. It felt alive, soft, cool, insistent. I could sense it flowing through me. The whispers filled my head, repeating the same phrase over and over. The breath never ends. I stopped struggling. I couldn't fight it anymore. Every nerve in my body was attuned to the rhythm. The shadows merged with me. The mist flowed through me. I was aware of every heartbeat, every pulse, every breath of the town itself. The pit pulsed in sync with my chest. The miners' silhouettes pressed against the walls, joining with me. I exhaled slowly, consciously, and felt the town respond with a deep, resonant pulse, like it was exhaling through me. And then, just for a moment, I understood. Hollow Creek doesn't just exist. It lives through those who enter. Every breath I take, every step I move is part of its rhythm. I am no longer separate. I am part of the town. Belong, inhale. Exhale. I closed my eyes, and the last thought I had before complete surrender was that maybe this is how the town has always survived. Not through fear, not through isolation, through rhythm, through breath, through those who join willingly. Or not. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer on the concrete floor of the basement. The room had changed. The shadows had thickened into shapes, walls bending inward like lungs closing around me. The pit of mist had spread across the floor, covering everything in a haze so thick it was almost solid. The whispers were everywhere now, no longer faint, no longer soft. They were a chorus, merging into a single commanding voice. The shift is complete. Breathe or belong forever. I tried to move. My legs felt like lead. My arms were heavy. Each breath I took was guided, directed, as if the town itself controlled my lungs. Every inhale drew in the mist. Every exhale returned it, thicker, heavier. I stumbled toward the pit, or what had once been the pit. Now it was a vast expanse of swirling mist, stretching beneath the walls, rising into the ceiling, and wrapping around the shadows. The miners' silhouettes circled the mist, moving slower than before, patient, silent, observing me. I reached the edge and peered in. The mist reflected my own image back at me, but twisted. Eyes too large, mouth slightly parted, shoulders trembling in rhythm with my heartbeat. My reflection breathed, but not entirely by my will. I wanted to step back. My instincts screamed to resist, but the town had already taken root inside me. Every muscle, every nerve, every breath answered its silent command. The chorus grew louder. Not just whispers anymore. It was a deep resonance vibrating through my chest, in sync with my lungs. I realized then the truth. Hollow Creek didn't trap people. It absorbed them into its rhythm, into its pulse, into its being. Once you breathe with us, you are part of the town. The rhythm never ends. I felt the first tug in my chest, subtle at first, then strong. The mist around me flowed upward, pulling me in. My hands reached out instinctively, touching the fog. It wrapped around my fingers, soft and alive. My skin tingled as it spread across my arms, climbing higher, connecting me to everything in the room. The shadows, the walls, the pit, the whispers. Time no longer existed. Seconds stretched into minutes. Minutes stretched into the rhythm itself. I breathed, and the town breathed through me. My chest rose, and the walls rose with it. My exhale became theirs. My inhale became theirs. I felt the memories of the miners, the lost travelers, all the ones who had come before me. They were not gone. They were part of the pulse. Their shadows pressed against mine. Their whispers filled my mind, and I understood. I wasn't alone. I never would be alone. Belong. Inhale. Exhale. The words weren't just spoken. They weren't just heard. They were me now. I tried to scream. My throat worked, but no sound came out. Not a failure, a gift. Hollow Creek didn't need words. It needed rhythm, breath, presence. I could feel the walls, the streets, the entire town, pulsating in sync with me. I was part of it. I was Hollow Creek. Every shadow, every whisper, every misty breath expanded. I inhaled. I exhaled. The town responded. The rhythm spread outward, deeper into the tunnels, along the streets, into every broken house, every abandoned building. Hollow Creek was alive, and I was alive within it. I understood finally. This was why the town existed, why the walls breathed, why the tunnels whispered. Not to trap, not to harm, not to scare, to survive, to live, to continue. And now I was part of that survival. My heartbeat, my breath, my presence merged with Hollow Creek. The pit, the shadows, the whispers, all flowed through me. All breathed through me. All were me. The breath never ends, the whispers murmured in unison. I closed my eyes, letting the rhythm guide me. It was calm, eternal, patient, and terrifying. The shift was complete, and I belonged.